Welcome to the Women in Change podcast, episode 3. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with Preethi Nair, who I've known actually quite a long time. We've been on a bit of a journey together, I think, haven't we?
We have indeed.
So welcome to the podcast. You've known me in my previous life at the BBC. I've known you in a few previous lives, and I'm delighted to say that we've been talking about squiggly careers on one of our podcasts recently with AstraZeneca. And if anyone can actually hold the medal for squiggly career, it's got to be you. So I'm going to reel off storyteller.
Yeah.
Renowned author.
Renowned, not sure, but author, yeah.
Okay. Mentioned storyteller, but actually consultant and a one-woman show?
Yeah.
Seriously? One-woman show?
A one-woman show in the West End, having never acted before, playing all 22 parts.
22 parts. We're going to come back to that one for sure. And now you're here because I wanted you here, particularly because you've been such a massive support of Women in Change, for which we are so incredibly grateful. But more importantly, because we are supporting you now to launch your new book, Unraveling, which is a novel.
Yes.
A novel. So why don't we start with a little bit about your journey? How do you go from growing up to consultancy, storyteller, author, and end up on stage playing 22 parts? Probably not all in that order, I should imagine.
So what I think I'll do is I'll tell the story in 3 parts, and then you just feel free to interrupt me.
That sounds good to me.
So I grew up in an immigrant family, and it was a difficult environment because it was the 1970s, and my parents just wanted a sense of safety and security for us. And what my father wanted me to be a lawyer. So as a daughter from an immigrant, it's either doctor, lawyer, accountant, or engineer. So ever since I can remember, he used to read passages from the Encyclopedia Britannica to me growing up, because he and my mother had saved up their whole life savings to buy these books. And he would read passages of the rule of law to me. And I have to say, I was 7 years old at the time.
Well, I must just say, I still remember, God, I'm going to show my age here. I actually remember the man knocking on the door selling them.
Yeah.
Actually, somebody used to knock on the door and come and ask if you wanted to buy an Encyclopedia Britannica. And I remember my stepfather, seriously, building a bookcase in the hallway so that you had to walk past them when you came into the house, all beautifully leather bound, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And the clincher, I think, was for the encyclopedia salesman was that he lifted up this whole book with one page and he said to my father, "This is lifetime learning."
Yes.
And my father parted with his entire life savings on those books.
Yes.
So anyway, he started reading passages from a very young age to us. And I didn't really have a choice. I was meant to be a lawyer. But I always knew that I wanted to be a writer.
Right.
Or something very creative, because I was always very imaginative. I loved the world of the imagination, but I wanted to make them proud of me. So I studied really hard, went to different universities, and ended up working for a management consultancy in the city.
Right. Wow. Okay. So God, we're going to get from management consultancy in the city to on stage.
No,
tell us a bit more.
Well, so I just always used to think that there was a very creative way of doing a strategy and change, like things like storytelling, a creative visualization. But we're talking like 25 years ago now. And these are buzzwords now, but 25 years ago, it was like stick to the data, stick to the facts, stick to the figures. And so in order to, I wouldn't say get rid of my creativity, but to have an outlet for it, I started to write. I just began writing, why do some people follow their dreams and why do other people not? And eventually, after a period of 2 years, I ended up with a novel. Well, I didn't know it was my first novel at the time, but it was a manuscript.
Right.
And it coincided with, like, I wanted to say to my boss, I'm giving up work to follow my dream. But it coincided that I was being made redundant. And as soon as I found out that I was being made redundant, I almost didn't want to follow my dream. I don't know if you get it. I wanted the security.
No, I
of a
do.
well-paid
But
job,
you're
and I just
talking, you're talking to somebody who's just taken redundancy after a 25-year career, effectively as a civil servant. So, no, that whole sense of, and actually, dare I say it, I've still got my redundancy in the bank and I am using it as a salary.
Yeah.
And I say that to you because it's going to run out in December.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of like, no.
So it's that feeling of like, oh my God, what do I do? And I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents. So I put on a suit and pretended to go to work.
No.
And so don't judge me for the next part, but that suit routine lasted 8 months. So I'd put on a suit and just pretend to go to work, and I'd end up in the library. And because I was just desperate to be an author, but I didn't know how.
And they had no idea that you literally put on your suit every morning. Nobody ever saw you in the library.
No, it was a combination. It was a combination of, I want to follow my dream. Then it was the combination of shame. And then, am I good enough to follow my dream? Am I like, there were so many things going on. But ultimately what I did, there's only so many books you can read in the library. But what I did was, I did what we did for most of our clients. So what is the end goal? Where do you see yourself going? And I wrote this fantastic story. And I'm a best-selling novelist. My books are translated internationally. Films are being made. And I looked at this.
So you're manifesting here.
Yeah,
I think that's what they call it.
Nowadays,
manifesting. Well, I have to tell you, I'm a great believer in that because I manifested an idea the other day.
Yeah.
And somebody that I wanted for one of our summits.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally came out of that, been really like, how will I write to them? Will I do this? Will I do that? And honestly, Preethi, I stood next to them in Nero's 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
And they said yes.
Yeah, I believe it.
Wow.
I believe it. I mean, the crazy things that happened as a result of me just dreaming, visualizing and believing, they just have been incredible. So I wrote down this list, and it was just magnificent. And I looked at my situation, which was unemployed, pretending to go to work and putting on a suit every day. And on this list, I just then simplified it. So I thought, I wrote on this strategically, I'm going to self-publish this book. I'm going to make it incredibly popular, and I'm going to sell it to a big publishing company. So I took all the savings that I had, and I put it into self-publishing, and I ran out of money, and I realized for any product, what you need is good PR. And back then I was incredibly shy and introverted. And the thought of calling up journalists saying, I'm Preethi Nair, I have a fantastic novel, and it's by Preethi Nair, would have no credibility. And like I said, I was introverted. So I took out another piece of paper and I wrote down the name Prue, because that's what my brother calls me. But it was the idea to have the most amazing publicist and to do a character sketch of what she would look like. And I did this character sketch. She was fearless, feisty, didn't care about rejection, wouldn't take no for an answer. And I looked at that sheet of paper and I thought, I'm going to become her. That's my alter ego, Prue. I'm going to set up a publishing house and I'm going to become her. So I set up this publishing house, set up this PR company.
And sorry, just to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Because I think with the world of social media today, there's a lot of acceptance of producing your own record, producing your own paper, whatever it might be, magazine.
Yeah.
And I know because we've produced our own magazine at Women in Change. But when we're talking about what
25 years ago.
So we're talking 25 years ago, pre-Amazon, pre-apps, probably.
Still using faxes.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're on a fax. No, but let's take people back, because actually I think this is really important, because somebody is listening to you now, holding a smartphone, an iPhone in their hand, right? They're going to think, well, I know how to do that. I can publish on this, that and the other. I'm on TikTok. I've got, trust me, I've got stepdaughters that are influencers earning money sitting at home. And I don't mean that as a detrimental thing to them. They want to bring up their kids, and they're earning money through apps, iPhones and everything else, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So a completely different world.
Yeah.
I think we're probably still posting letters to
we're
each other. We're on landlines. So you've set up this alter ego.
Yeah.
You've set up a fictitious, I'm assuming, publishing type house, or
Yeah.
have you actually formed a company?
Yeah, I formed a company.
You have?
So
Okay.
It's called the Creative House. It was creative because it was in my parents' back bedroom. Don't forget,
And they
I'm
don't
also
know?
pretending to go to work, but we've got office refurbishment, so I'm at home.
Oh my God, the lie!
Working from home.
Lie.
It was just, I don't know, it was just spinning out of control. Anyway, so I'm not going to pretend that being Prue was easy, because the first call I made to a journalist, she said hello, and I put the phone down because I wasn't sure.
I'm sure.
What I was supposed to say. But after 3 months of being Prue and just getting rejected and finding my way, it became quite a slick operation. So I'd call up as Prue, call the journalist as Prue, set up the interview for myself, Preethi, change my voice, do the interview. And so it went on and on and on. And I managed to get lots and lots of publicity slots, like interviews, etc.
So did you, when you were taking you back to your school days, were you in any plays?
No.
At school?
No.
So you never acted?
No. I was an introvert. I was a little mouse. I never
So
said anything.
how do you take somebody who's so introvert?
Alter ego.
Right.
It's not me. It's somebody else.
Okay.
I'm more integrated as a person now, but back then it was just, I have to be someone else.
Yeah.
So, lined up a lot of press and had to go and collect the books. And I thought, what am I going to tell my parents? Because I was still living at home. Can't suddenly arrive with a whole load of books. And I said to my dad, I've been picked up by a small publisher. And my dad said, oh, you still have your job, don't you? And I just felt I didn't know what to say. So I said, yes. And I lied. And although I lied, I was driving to collect these books. But you know, when you feel that you're on the right path and it's the right thing to do, in spite of all the lies, it felt like that. Until I got to our front door with these books. And my parents, because they were so proud of my book deal, had invited all our friends and family to celebrate this book deal that I had given myself. And then therein it just started going downhill, and it was disaster after disaster, because the first consignment of my books came back with page 179 missing. I had lined up all the press. So when you obviously know that when you promise something to press, they're not really bothered about your logistical problems. And the books needed to go out that week. The printer had made an error. He couldn't reprint the books. He said, I can print 3,000 pages of page 179 and courier them to you. And so he did. And I literally sat Pritt sticking these pages into these books so I could get them to press. Got the books to press. And then there was, you will not remember this, probably have no bearing on your life, but actually a step before then is I was doing the press interviews, and I remember being on LBC and Julia Somerville saying to me, where can we get hold of copies of Gypsy Masala, your novel? And I had overlooked the entire distribution network.
Oh my God.
Pre-Amazon, right? So I just took a deep breath and I said, in all good bookshops. And I visited 200 bookshops in the space of 10 days saying, I know authors don't do this. I'm Preethi Nair. Please stock my book. So I was getting traction from bookshops. Press articles were appearing. And then there was that petrol crisis. I don't know if you remember it.
Yes,
but
yes,
you could not transport goods, nor love. And you know how PR works. Well, PR pre-internet days, you have to have product placement, you have to have the article in place. The consumer goes into the bookshop, sees the book and buys it. My press was out those 4 days. You could not get a copy of the book for love nor money because they were stuck in the warehouse.
Oh my God.
So that dream swiftly came to an end. And I was about to put.
So you've made a huge loss at this point.
Massive loss. Put together my CV creatively to explain what I'd been doing for the last 2 years.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you just there.
Yeah.
Right. So I just want to recount where we are.
Yes.
Your parents still think you're working?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you say that again to stop you there?
Yeah.
Hoping a little bit. So although I said work close to it, sort of like.
So where do you want us to pick up from?
Like the aim there. It's just you.
Yeah. So do we pick up from let's step back?
Can you stop you there?
Yeah.
Am I rambling?
No, it's great. It's an amazing story. Yeah, no, I'm interrupting you to remind people where we are and what we're... Okay, so... No. So let me stop you there, Preethi, because I'm just trying to work. I'm so enthralled by this story. As you can probably see, I'm on the edge of my seat. And if you can't see me, just trust me, I'm on the edge of my seat. So your parents still think you're working. They've thrown a party to all the friends and family. And coming from an immigrant family myself, I can understand what that feels like. Then they think you're going to work. They think you've landed a book deal. Do they know that you're self-funding this book deal? So they don't know you're self-funding.
Yeah.
You've got a nightmare with the distribution.
Yeah.
And it's gone to press. And you've paid for this out of what? Because
My savings.
Your savings now.
Yeah.
And where have these savings come from? They were from working originally,
yeah.
Right? But because you're living at home, I suppose it's not been as difficult,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So I'm on the edge of my seat now. So it's all unraveling.
Yeah,
Hence the new title of the book. But we'll come to that.
Totally. And then I was about to put together my CV creatively, and I came across this card, and it was this woman that I'd met at the London Book Fair, and it was Trisha Stewart, who was amazing. She set up the calendar for Calendar Girls to raise funds for leukemia research. And when I met her, she said to me, we're a group of 12 women, and I know you're doing this on your own. So if you ever need any help or advice, you make sure you call me.
Right.
So I called her and I was in tears. And she said, I'm sorry, love, who are you?
Oh.
So I told her the story because it was the first time I was actually telling someone. And she said, what you need to do is to get up here to Yorkshire. And no disrespect to Yorkshire, but I said, what do I need to go to Yorkshire for? And she said, because the next decision you never make a decision from a point of weakness. You make it from a point of strength, a position of strength. So come up to Yorkshire, think about what you're going to do next. And if you decide to come up to Yorkshire, go see my agent, Diana, who's in Bedfordshire. So I thought, hang on a minute, this is a complete stranger offering me their home, offering me advice, and offering me access to their agent. So I said yes. And I drove up to see Diana. And Diana said to me, forget about the story that's gone before, the whole Prue story. Start again. If you want to be a writer, write truthfully, write honestly, write from the heart, but not because you want to get published, but because you have a story to tell. And if you decide to do that, I will read the manuscript. So I went up to Yorkshire for 6 weeks, and my second manuscript, 100 Shades of White, just poured out of me because it was my family story spanning 3 generations. I handed it back to her and she said, you know what? I'm not promising anything. Just go back to work. And I was in the middle of putting together.
So when she says, sorry, just go back to work, does she think you've got a day job also? Or does she mean go back to work? Go back to writing.
Go and find yourself a job. Like, I can't promise that I'm going to be able to do anything with this.
Okay, so find a job.
Yeah, find a job. So I was, again, putting together my CV very creatively. And she calls me up and she says, I've taken it to various publishers and they want to meet you. So how it works is, so they decide what price. It's like going to an auction, but they decide how much they're going to bid for the book based on how marketable you are, how sellable you are.
Sure.
So you go into these different meetings and you meet with their whole team. So you meet with the editorial team, the PR team, every single person, marketing team.
Right.
And then you have a huge conference. Anyway, I walked into HarperCollins and I literally knew every single person around that table because I'd either met them as Prue, gate crashing parties, or I'd met the sales director because he was doing quality control and he saw me selling abysmally. And subsequently he said to all the bookshops, there's a crazy woman coming, just make sure you stock her book. And he was there at the meeting. So anyway.
Wow. And then when you say, sorry, I'm just going again, because I'm sure there's people sitting here listening to this podcast, when you say, I knew everyone in the room, some of them knew me as Prue. So was there anyone there that sat there and went, how can you be Preethi if you're Prue? Or had they twigged?
No, they knew that. They knew before I met them that whole story.
So they knew the alter ego story.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so anyway, they offered me a 3-book deal. So I signed a 3-book deal with HarperCollins, and then my publicist, Prue, subsequently was shortlisted as publicist of the year for the phenomenal job she'd done on Gypsy Masala.
No way.
So I get the invitation, and I think I'm not going to go because, God forbid, I win. I can't thank the various parts of myself who've been an absolute dream to work for, with. So I didn't win, but the publicist who ended up winning that year became my publicist at HarperCollins.
Wow.
And so I was signed, and I wrote for them full time. I would say probably about 8 years.
Okay, so again, I'm going to stop you again.
Yes.
Okay, so you've got your book deal.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So congratulations on that. What a wonderful thing to have happened. And again, that sort of belief in yourself, isn't it? And that sort of, I guess, determination, actually, right? Sheer determination that this is, you haven't let go of this all the way through, even when things were unraveling.
Yeah.
What do your parents know right now?
They know all of it. And so when I signed the book deal, the first thing I did was I ran home to tell my dad. And my dad said, "When are you giving up the hobby?" But,
right.
Subsequently was incredibly proud of me. But it was
were they angry at first?
Yeah. I was not happy at the fact that, I had lied.
Yeah,
I had lied my way through. And, one thing that my father had totally taught me about was honesty, and to be honest and have integrity and all of those things. So on the one hand, disappointed, but on the other hand, very proud.
Gosh.
Yeah. So then
So you got your 3 books.
Yeah.
Are they out now? Or?
Yeah, no, I got my 3-book deal, wrote my 3 books. Didn't quite enjoy the process of being published by a big publishing company. I thought I would enjoy the process.
Is that because of the ownership issues?
Yeah. You go from being an independent to making all your decisions, to having all your decisions taken from you, overruled. You see covers that you absolutely hate. You have no say unless you're a big, massive name. I'm sure even then it must be difficult. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. Books, bestsellers are made. There's a whole insider thing that you find out and you think, wow, it's just a system, and I don't think I want to be part of this system.
I understand that retrospectively and that you're looking back on that, but obviously, given your journey, and we're going to talk about the rest of your journey, but would you be where you are today, do you think, if you hadn't gone through what you've had to go through with HarperCollins? I mean, if you would be where you are today.
Yes, I would, because I would have made a different set of decisions, and I would have made it work.
Right. So if you were talking to your younger self now, what would you be saying to her, or what would Prue be saying to her?
It was that all that glistens is not gold.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, I am very grateful for the deal, because all that now makes me sound quite ungrateful.
No.
I'm very ungrateful for the deal. But what I'm saying is that there is a system. And once you are aware of the system.
So it's a machine.
Yeah, it is a machine. And once you're aware of the system, you have a choice to either get out of it or be part of it.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily want to be part of it. So then I moved on to the next part of the story.
Wow. Okay. So let's get to the next part of the story then, because you've got 3 books out now. And I've looked at your bio, by the way, and if I read out all the books that you published, we'll be here for a very long time.
So what I did then was I decided to go back into consultancy and set up my own consultancy, but a very creative way, teaching storytelling to leaders. And I pretty much did it in the same way that I set up the book, and everything else that I've ever done was just do it. So I looked through my whole contact list. I set up a 1-day storytelling workshop, invited everyone along. Someone who was at the bookseller at the time had moved to the Financial Times and came along, and she thought it was a brilliant idea to write for in the Financial Times about storytelling. And she asked me who I was, and I said, well, I'm MD of the company. And she said, and what's the company called? And I had no name, nothing. And I said, oh, it's called Kiss the Frog, because I said the same thing, the first thing that came into my head: transformation, storytelling, leaders. And so Kiss the Frog was born. Went home, cobbled up a website, because I thought, God, if it comes out in FT, I'm going to be busy, or people will look me up, or Anyway, appeared in the
These
FT.
leaps of faith that you keep having.
Appeared in the FT, and then immediate client base, bankers, lawyers. First job was an offsite in San Moritz to the board of an investment bank. You have to appreciate this time. I've been in lovely fairyland for 8 years.
I was going to say, that's hardcore.
Yeah.
That's
and then
hardcore.
moving from that to a big strategy meeting with the board of an investment bank, being the only woman, 8 men. Oh my
and
God.
dare I say it, not just the only woman, because we talk a lot about diversity, and you're standing in San Moritz in Sweden, in Switzerland, sorry.
Yeah.
That's quite something. And again, just for our listeners, when is this? What year
This is now probably 2015.
Okay.
10 years ago.
So it's 10 years, still 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago. Difficult is an
and the
understatement.
nerves, I mean.
It's an understatement. I mean, it was a huge learning curve, because what I learned, which was a valuable lesson, was creativity, storytelling, great, was all innovative back then, right? And nobody else was doing it.
Yes.
But you have to make people feel safe.
Right.
You have to have the parameters of safety, because with creativity, you're asking them to come out of their comfort zone. With these incredibly senior leaders, they don't necessarily want to look silly in front of their peers.
Yes.
And so you have to know how to handle that dynamic. And it probably took me a good 2 to 3 years to really find my feet and to know what worked, what didn't work, how to deal with incredibly senior people. And it took me 2 to 3 years to get the business off the ground, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm sure it did. I mean, I think interestingly, I just took a call about somebody who's writing an article about how do you influence at the board? How do you really get what you need at the board? And I think I've also just done some work with a wonderful man called Sean Jones, who actually takes Lego into the boardroom. And again, those are some of the challenges that he was speaking to me about. How do you become completely relaxed in something that at the age of 5 you couldn't wait to play with all the time and have? And now we see very, very serious grown-up Lego. I know somebody who's building a Range Rover. I think it's taken him 3 years. But play.
Yeah.
Play, actually. The things you mention about being safe, being creative, bringing play into creativity and thinking, that's incredibly brave. And to get, I suspect, what were, and I don't know them, but I would think very, very powerful men in a room to feel to let their guard down, shall we say?
Yeah.
Then that's got to have been a huge stress and pressure for you at the time.
And it was a process of learning, like with the books, it was like, what works, what doesn't work? How do you make people feel safe and take them out of their comfort zone? How do you show them the worth of good storytelling? How do you get them to create an element of psychological safety so that they can share their story, but not in a way that makes them feel too vulnerable?
Yeah.
So all those elements and all those dynamics, it took a long, long time. It took about 3 years, I'd say, to actually master. And then I loved it. I absolutely, I
love the name, by the way, Kiss the Frog.
Thank you.
Having somebody who's set up a business recently, and I've been trying to think of a fun name, and I ended up just saying what it was, which is Change Story. I actually think, wow, probably wasn't creative enough. I should have phoned you. Really should have phoned you. But yes, so you've gone into being a consultant now. How long were you a consultant
and
for?
I still am. So I still do that. I still run it. But what had happened to me, like I was running the business, I'd say like 7, 8 years by that time. And for me, although it was innovative for other people, it had got stale, and it was time to move, and it was time to do something next thing.
Right.
But I'd gotten stuck in a comfort zone, and I'd got stuck in that comfort zone because a few major things had happened in a space of a year. And that was, I lost my mum.
Right.
I got married. I had a baby, and I moved house all in the space of a year.
Huge change.
And I thought,
huge.
I will never, ever, ever come out of my comfort zone. All I want is safety. And I clung on to the safety of, the work that I did in consulting. I knew it was good work. I knew that it worked. but I also knew it was time to move on and evolve it
Right.
and to make it fresh.
Yep.
And I thought, how am I going to do that? No, I don't want to do that. I just want to stay. And then slowly but surely, something was dying inside. My creativity was dying inside. And I thought, I got to a point, I thought, I have to do something quite radical.
So is this where you suddenly take on 22 parts and go on? No.
Yeah.
So you've just had a baby and you're going to go and write a one-woman
No,
show?
she was probably about 4 at the time.
Oh,
So
all right. Still.
And what I did was, for other people, when they have their midlife crisis, it's about bungee jumping or buying new cars or buying and for me, it was taking creative risk. And so, I wrote this one woman show.
I met you at that point.
Yes.
I think that's when you and I first started to cross paths, because you were touting around the one woman show and I was really interested in what you were doing.
Yeah.
But I do remember that was very much how we ended up in each other's lives.
Yeah. And I did try to put it on, but everyone said there's no market for a 50-year-old Asian woman show. So I thought, I'll do it myself. So I booked a theatre in the West End. I rehearsed for 18 months and I played all 22 parts. And I have to say, it was one of the most...
I've got goosebumps right now. Can I just tell you? No, seriously, I have to interrupt you because I don't know what our listeners are thinking at this point, whether they've let out a scream or whether they're like, how on earth do you do that? Because you haven't, again, I just want to go back to the fact that you haven't gone to acting school. You haven't ever been on the stage. I've got a fantastic friend, Sammy Spiro, who I went to school with, who's now, just appeared with Sir Anthony Hopkins in film. But she won. I remember her going on stage and winning Best Newcomer at 40.
Wow.
Right. And she was like, how funny to win Best Newcomer. So, Sammy, if you're listening, I'm very proud of you. But seriously, I know what that takes because I followed her journey, and hers was trying to be quite conventional. Yours isn't even conventional. You started off in learning law and in management consulting, and then here we are. You've sort of taken on different parts. You've become an author. You've signed deals with HarperCollins. You've got married. You've had a baby. You've unfortunately suffered one of the worst losses because none of us want to lose our parents. And now you are sort of thinking, right, how do I bring myself to life? So you just go and rent a stage. That's a fortune. But, that's a cost in itself.
Yeah.
Right? That's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
So you've booked this theatre.
I booked a theatre to put a stake in the ground. So I don't know anything. I just know that I've got the theatre and there's a date that I have to perform.
And who's your mentors in this throughout this journey? Who are you talking to?
I found a fantastic theatre director, and she said, I'll help you through this process.
Wow.
And so I was working with her, but she said, first of all, you need to train in a technique called Meisner. And Meisner is being very honest and being very present in the moment. So to be able to do that, you need to learn your lines like cell memory. And so you react honestly to what's happening in the room. So if someone walks in late and you're feeling pissed off, you throw your lines at them as if you're pissed off. So it's like we're sitting here, there's an interaction going on between us, and I'm reacting to you in the moment honestly, right? Because there's this energy, there's a dynamic between us. And it's how do you learn to read that energy and that dynamic? And that is what I spent 18 months doing, as well as learning lines and rehearsing.
And that learn that line, learn that energy, feel is so... We've been doing a podcast in the series with a lady from AstraZeneca, Helen McPhee, and she talked about energy. She talked about empathy, and she talked about the importance of the people that you surround yourself with. And I find that, and she's in change and transformation, right? And you talk about Kiss the Frog and your role as a consultant and all of that as somebody who myself, and we know each other through this way, right? Of me being in change for over 20 years. You have to know that energy when you walk in a room. You have to understand where people are.
Yeah.
And back to storytelling, you have to think about the words or the way that you're going to say those words to people. So it's interesting because I think a lot of what you say can be applied to the whole change function, that Meisner moment. I know I've been in the middle of a speech or a storytelling. I see somebody pick up their mobile, go to the loo. All of a sudden I'm like, what is it that I've lost the connection?
Yeah.
What is it at that moment
Yeah.
that's made you think, I can't be bothered with her anymore?
Yeah.
So-
And it's funny because a lot of the work that I learned still feeds into my consulting work.
Yeah.
So I see it now. They're not separate. They're intertwined, and one I learn from each of the professions that I do, right? And I bring creativity into the corporate world and vice versa. Strategic element into when I produce the books. So it all comes together. But yeah, it was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life.
And was that for one night? Did you do
Well, it was meant to be for one night, but it went on and on because we kept getting invited back to the theatre.
Wow.
And we kept getting invited back to the theatre. And then we were offered a 380-seater theatre in Leicester Square. And bear in mind, I'm not an actress. It wasn't even my dream to be an actress. My dream was to overcome myself, and my fears, and to be bigger and to feel alive. And I had to sit there and think, do I want to do, is this the direction I want to go in? And it wasn't. But what had happened was the producer of The Crown had come to see the show, and it subsequently got optioned for television. And then lockdown happened and all of that happened. And I thought, what I really want to do is I want to turn the show into a novel, because that's what I wanted to do from the very beginning. But because I was heartbroken by my whole novel writing experience and being published, I was putting it off. So I took the opportunity to turn it into a novel called Unraveling.
And before we get to that, sorry, I love a cliffhanger. Okay. This is a podcast. We need people to continue listening. But before we get to that, can I ask you, you've clearly got an incredibly supportive husband through this journey. I'm assuming he's got a day job that he's doing. Where's your father in this at this moment in time? Supportive?
Yeah, no,
really on board?
On board. I didn't actually tell him that I was doing the one-woman show until probably a couple of weeks before I went on stage, because my he's a wonderful man, and he's the biggest dreamer I know. And honestly, he literally came from nothing to build everything that he has. So if anyone taught me about dreaming,
I get it. Yeah.
It was my father. But he would not understand the notion of booking a theatre 18 months in advance and just spending your time literally rehearsing and not knowing what you're rehearsing for. Because what is the point?
Yeah.
And where is the money? And all of those practical questions.
But really, I'm just reflecting and thinking, because there must have been so many other pressures in your life when you get married and you have a mortgage and the sensible things in life, right? And I know how many times I've said, when I get to this age, I want to be doing this. And then something happened. I've got a 25-year-old daughter at university because of COVID, right? Yeah. So I'm still doing other things that I perhaps wouldn't be doing if I didn't have a 25-year-old daughter at 20. And I'm happy that she is, and I'm very proud of her. But I guess my point is that we can get very wrapped up in just paying the bills and on the treadmill. Yeah. It takes a very brave person, and I'd say a very brave partner of yours, your husband in this case, to get behind you to say, okay, let's do this. Clearly you've had to have a lot.
Yeah. And I was still consulting at the time.
Right.
Okay. So I was still working at the time. So it wasn't a whole 18 months of just doing this.
But even so, there's more pressure on you then, right? Because you have
to make
very
it work.
Big board members that, through in San Moritz. Were you skiing with them at least? I hope you got some skiing in. So let's pick up, right? So you turned down. So do you turn down the TV option? Because I think that's where we left people.
So I signed the option for television, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to turn it into a novel.
Okay.
And my publisher had the option for book 4. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I didn't necessarily have to take the book deal. So they offered me a 4th book deal for Unraveling, and I turned it down. And I turned it down because I had such creative vision for it, and I knew exactly what it was and
brave.
What it wanted to be.
Because most people surely in that situation are just going to go guaranteed income because you're going to get paid up front, right?
Yeah, but it's about the integrity of the book and having whole say about cover design, how it's laid out, what the story is without changing it. And I just had such vision. I thought,
and it is beautiful, by the way. I mean, it is beautiful. I won't spoil it for the podcast because we'll make sure it's up on the links when we put this up. But it is a beautiful piece of work.
I commissioned an artist.
Yes,
to do
hats off, because it really is.
So it's how I wanted it to be, and it would be a book that I would be proud of, a book that I would be proud to promote. I've had books where I've looked at it and I thought, oh my God, I can't possibly promote that. That doesn't look like one of my books. And so just to have the integrity of that was important for me. So Unraveling is coming out on the 27th of September.
So excited for you.
Currently doing all the PR around it, but as myself.
So Prue's not sitting in the waiting room outside.
No, Prue's not outside, but I'm doing it as myself. I'm saying, this is who I am. This is what I've done. Would you like to speak to me?
Well, and I think, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Secondly, I think we've entered a world where that's far more accepted than that ever was before, right? I mean, I lived in the world of media, as does I haven't really recognised the person who's helped me make all these podcasts, Leah Devine from Divine Media, who is and has been one of a fantastic colleague of mine at the BBC. But, we come from a very traditional background at the Beeb, where we know how you make a program, we know how you put it on air, we know how you edit it, it's all in the editing, all of that. And actually, and I remember very much, all the pluggers, as they're called, and those people listening to this that are a plugger will know how hard it has been to go into somewhere day after day and probably sit in front of somebody like Leo and go, please play this piece of music, please put this book on air, please tell that person that they need to speak to this person. And plugging somebody or a record or whatever is incredibly difficult. Whereas now we just see somebody suddenly go, I saw a wonderful clip actually recently of Adele, who put two wonderful Irish guys on stage that she found on whether it was Instagram or TikTok. And actually from there, they ended up on the Ellen show. And then the next thing they probably got a record deal. I don't know how far they got, but that's all just from, 2 seconds of social media. So
it's a very different world.
It is a different world.
Started out with my fax machines to today. But there's still equally a lot of learning because it's a digital world.
And that's really what I want to get to, because here at Women in Change, and the reason for doing these podcasts for Women in Change is the fact that we are uniting women who are doing great impact, doing great things. We're uniting women who are doing great things around the world to create some form of impact. And what I see here is somebody who has really embraced change. I'm not saying you haven't had the fear, that you haven't smelt the fear, because God, I can't even imagine some of those moments.
Yeah. Can I just interrupt you?
Yeah, of course.
That I am actually riddled with fear and self-doubt. And it's not but I keep going anyway. And the way I keep going is just tiny steps every day. And I think, what did I do that was great today? I want to just be a little tiny thing, and well done, even if it was small. And even if it was I answered a phone call, even that small, or I sent out 5 emails that I didn't want to send out. Well done, so it's not like I don't want to quickly give the impression that I don't have self-doubt, that I just go for it. No, I have all those things and I still do it, so if that's helpful to someone else, then, just focus on the tiny victories,
baby steps
of every day, And
I love that, the fact that you were in amongst all of that you were able to stop for a second and say, actually, I had a good day, or I'm proud of myself because I got that, or wow, I've got a one-woman show in London and I've been offered a TV deal.
Yeah, but it doesn't happen in that way. It happens that way retrospectively when you look back.
I appreciate that.
But just even learning new lines and you think, I've mastered the paragraph today, and at the end of a year, I mastered the whole 50 pages. But just even focusing on the fact I mastered a paragraph in a day is a massive win.
So tell me, because the book's out now.
Yeah.
Kiss the Frog's still going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many lessons here. If you had to sum up a few of them for our listeners.
Yeah.
What would you say to anybody listening to this podcast now about your journey? I would say absolute self-belief for you, because you couldn't do what you've done if you really genuinely didn't believe. And I also heard you say gut, and I think there's a whole podcast to be done on gut. And I don't just mean good gut, I mean about feeling gut. But what are yours? What would you leave our listeners with?
I just say, and I'd go back to my dad, ironically, because my dad is a huge dreamer and believer, and he just taught me to dream big. I mean, to see it in full technicolor, and then just to take one step towards that dream or to that vision. Doesn't have to be a massive thing, like, obviously booking a theatre is a little bit extreme, but it is showing a commitment towards your vision and showing direction. And it is just truly amazing, the things that happen, like serendipity we were talking about earlier, right? You stood next to that lady in Cafe Nero, or whatever, but those things happen.
Yeah.
The levels of serendipity are amazing once you take a step towards whatever you want to do. And, you will meet obstacles. Obstacles are a part of the journey. And I think obstacles are there to test your resolve. Like, how much do I believe in this?
Yeah, resilience.
How much do I want this? Do I really believe in this? And very often, for me, it's happened that it's the perception. How do you see an obstacle? Like, you can change it. You can see it. Well, I will say to myself, and trust me, I'm overcoming quite a few obstacles right now with the launch of with the launch of Unraveling. I always say, how is this working for me? How is it working for me? For example, with the 3,000 pages missing, I was able to give those books away at the London Book Fair, where big publishers had no budget to give away books. As a small publisher, I was giving away books on account of an error. So I'm always looking at
opportunities.
Yeah, in the obstacle.
But that is the thing about change, right?
Yeah.
If we take it back to the fundamental purpose of where we're trying to get to with these podcasts anyway, where we talk about something to do with change.
Yeah.
That you can see change in two ways. You can see it as a nightmare and fear. And look, there'll always be some fear around change, even if you're just your choice to change your house or whatever it is, right? But actually opportunity. Yeah. And I think the thing around that we don't talk enough about is, how do you turn a change into an opportunity? Yeah. And I think your wise words today, the podcast that we've done with you, the conversations that I'm having with you, I think has given the biggest air of opportunity, positivity to people, to anyone out there that thinks, I'm really going to write that book now, or actually I can go on stage, or I can be something,
or I can start my business,
or I can, yes, which
whatever,
is where I am right now.
Whatever it may be, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. My goodness, I would love to say a whole lot more, but we are out of time. But Preethi, delighted to get behind the book. It is, for those of you who can't see it right now, I'm sure if you pop over to our website, you'll see a copy of the book. But really, where can we get the book? That most importantly,
honestly, in all good bookshops, it's true.
It really is. We still need to go to a bookshop.
Obvious places like Amazon, online, anywhere really.
Yeah. Anywhere really. Yeah. But this time it is anywhere really. So if you want to go and get Unraveling, I can seriously tell you it's an absolutely beautiful book. And whilst I am a big Kindle reader, this is definitely one for the bookshelves. It's beautiful. In fact, I was thinking the other day, actually, Preethi, it would make a beautiful poster on a wall in a house, because it's that beautiful. Thank you again. Thank you for... a few things really, Preethi. We've met at different parts of our life. Women in Change is really doing some really great things right now, uniting women change makers. You are definitely one of those. I'm absolutely delighted to say that you will be at our summit. Yeah. You are opening our second day. If you're listening afterwards, you will be able to see back some of the summit. If you are listening before the summit date, which is on the 14th and 15th of November, tickets are on sale on the Women in Change website if you want to come and listen to Preethi, or just enjoy this podcast. Can I thank you so much for being with us today? No, and good luck with the book.
Thank you. And can I just thank Women in Change as well, because you've been massive supporters, and it is a fantastic organisation.
Thank you. Thanks so much.